In this sensory route, fibers from dorsal root ganglion are carried by sensory axons of the central process of the dorsal root ganglion. These fibers are known as general, somatic, afferent, and bringing the sensation from the somatic, that is soma, body wall, and these are bringing the sensation or sensory modalities from the skin, tendons, ligaments and muscles. So this functional component of the spinal cord is known as general, somatic, afferent. Now the other component which is entering in the dorsal or sensory horn is visceral component, and it is known as general, visceral, afferent. This general, visceral, afferent is bringing sensation from the viscera, from chemoreceptor and stretch receptors. So this is general, visceral, afferent, and here in this motor or ventral horn, the fibers leaving the spinal cord from ventral horn and leave the cord from posterolateral sulcus, and these are entering from the anterolateral, posterolateral sulcus, and here is anterolateral sulcus, anterolateral sulcus, and here it is posterolateral sulcus. So the fibers of the motor horn or the motor fibers enter in the motor horn of the gray matter through the anterolateral sulcus, and these fibers which are entering from lateral part are known as, or leaving the lateral part are known as general, somatic, efferent. These fibers are coming from these are going to effector organs like muscles, tendons, ligaments and joints. And again here are visceral fibers which are leaving the medial part of the motor horn in the form of general, visceral, efferent. Efferent means motor and going to the effector organ, and afferent means sensory from effector organ to the CNS. So this is the basic arrangement of the fibers in the spinal cord. Now the lowermost part of the brainstem is having the same organization and same arrangement of the fibers and having the same central canal known as the canal or the closed part of the medulla. But when in upper part this canal is opened like a book. Here is, I will explain the canal. This canal, it is known as the spinal canal or central canal in the spinal cord, and in the closed part of the medulla, here it is the central canal, but in upper part of the canal, this canal opens from the posterior part like this. I will demonstrate this opening using this paper. Here is central canal and surrounding grey matter in form of butterfly or H shaped. Now here is this grey matter, well organized, straightforward manner, and in brainstem, lower part of brainstem having the same structure of the grey and white matter organization, but when it ascends in upper part, this organization is changed completely by opening this central canal from behind like this, and this becomes the floor of the fourth ventricle, Now, I will explain here how this central canal opens. Now this becomes like this. This opening, very small opening, now become the fourth ventricle, and the gray matter. This gray matter, which is edge-shaped or butterfly-shaped, open like a book, and arrangement of the, again this is posterior median sulcus, which was here, it is median sulcus now, and this is opened central canal in form of the fourth ventricle, floor of fourth ventricle and roof of fourth ventricle. It is formed by cerebellum. Now, what will be the position of these gray matter nuclei in cerebellum? Now, this posterior most part or posterior lateral gray columns becomes lateral most after opening the canal from here. I will demonstrate here again. This was our butterfly shaped gray matter. Now it opens like this. So this horn becomes lateral here and here. It opens from here. So after opening, this white matter comes forward, and this gray matter, which is in form of ventral horn, is pressed backward in the floor of fourth ventricle, and now the arrangement of the nuclei in the brainstem will be like this. This motor horn will be most medial, and this sensory horn or this dorsal horn will be lateral like this. Now, here was the lateral column, intermediate or lateral column, and here was sulcus limitans. Now here is sulcus limitans, which divide the motor and sensory nuclei of the gray matter of the brainstem. Now, it is very simple to memorize the nuclei of brainstem using this diagram and this diagram. So, it is very simple. Here is general somatic efferent. This part will become medial most part will become general somatic efferent. General, there are only general components below the neck part, that is in upper limbs, in trunk and in lower limbs. But in head and neck area there are some spatial senses also. So first of all, I will talk about the general sensation, general somatic efferent. This is again the motor component and supplying the muscles which develop from soma, that is body wall, and these are represented by the third, the fourth, sixth and 12th cranial nerve in head and neck region. So third, fourth, sixth and 12th nerves having the component, functional component in form of general somatic efferent. Now lateral to the general somatic efferent, here is general visceral efferent. So this will form a general visceral efferent. This general visceral efferent is also known as parasympathetic outflow. Parasympathetic outflow, and this component, that is general, as the name indicates, it is general sensation, visceral, supplying the viscera, and efferent, that is bringing the outflow toward the effector organs. So this nuclei is represented by the 3rd, 7th, 9th and 10th cranial nerves. The dorsal nucleus of vagus is the largest nucleus of general visceral efferent, and it is also represented by 3rd nerve, Edinger-Westphal nucleus, the lacrimatory nucleus, the superior salivatory nucleus and inferior salivatory nucleus, which we will talk in detail in the separate lecture from the midbrain, pons and medulla. So these are two general motor nuclei of the brainstem. Now one special, not only special but very special nuclei develop in the brainstem in the form of branchiomotor outflow. I will draw this nuclei here in the anterior part. This branchiomotor, this is known as SVE, spatial visceral efferent column. This branchiomotor column is represented mainly by nucleus ambiguous and motor nuclei of the 5th nerve and 7th nerve. That is, it is represented by the 5th, 7th, 9th and 10th. Spatial visceral efferent is the motor outflow from the brainstem for the muscles which take origin from the branchial arches or pharyngeal arches. These are spatial muscles because these are semi-autonomic muscles. These are under voluntary control and these are not under voluntary controls. So these muscles are ambiguous in nature. So nucleus ambiguous and motor nuclei of the 5th and 7th cranial nerve make the spatial visceral efferent outflow for the muscles of the branchial arches. For example, there are some muscles of facial expression. These are supplied by 5th cranial nerve, 7th cranial nerve, and these muscles develop from the branchial arch. In same way, the muscles of mastication are also taking origin from the branchial arch and supplied by this spatial visceral efferent component of the 5th cranial nerve. In same way, the muscles of larynx and pharynx are supplied by the spatial visceral efferent component, and these are supplied by the vagus nerve, by fibers of vagus nerve and cranial part of the spinal accessory nerves. This cranial part of the spinal accessory nerve also carry the fibers of the spatial visceral efferent through the vagus nerve. And now this is sulcus limitans. In the lateral part of the sulcus limitans, there are afferent or sensory components of the brain stem. I have already told that this open part which is open from behind. Now this grey horn, that is dorsal grey horn or sensory grey horn, is open from the lateral and form the lateralmost part of the brainstem nuclei, and this nuclei, which is sensory or afferent in nature, it will also divide it in different nuclei. The lateralmost part, which is coming from here, in the lateralmost part of the brainstem, and it will form a long tract and nuclei, which is the main somatosensory nuclei of the head and neck, known as trigeminal nuclei. Fifth nerve or trigeminal. This nuclei is having the component of the general somatic afferent, and one very special somatosensory or spatial somatic afferent. In form of vestibular nuclei and in form of cochlear nuclei. Here is a spatial somatic afferent, that is for hearing, equilibrium and balance of the body. This column is known as spatial somatic afferent. It is spatial in nature because hearing and equilibrium and maintenance of the posture are carried by this spatial type of nuclei, that is vestibular, and hearing by cochlear. So it is spatial in nature and it is coming from the ear, so it is spatial somatic afferent. Now one thin and large nuclei develop between this sulcus limitans and this spatial somatic afferent. It is viscerosensory. This is known as nucleus of tractus solitarius or solitary nucleus. Tractus solitarius. It is having a medial part and lateral part. The part near the sulcus limitans is general visceral afferent, and receiving the afferent from the viscera, that is again changes in chemoreceptor and stretch receptor are perceived by this general visceral afferent part of the tractus solitary or solitary nucleus. And lateral part of this nuclei is having the spatial visceral afferent type of the receptors or the functional component or sensory neurons, which receive the spatial visceral afferent. In head and neck, there is tongue, there is soft palate, which are having the taste buds and receive and sensation of taste. This sensation is carried by the 7th, 9th and 10th cranial nerve, and these nerves are connected to the spatial visceral afferent component, that is 7th, 9th and 10th, and spatial visceral afferent is by 9th and 10th cranial nerves. So this is the basic arrangement of the sensory and the efferent columns of the brainstem, which were well organized in the spinal cord. Now these are scattered but still aggregated in form of well formed nuclei to give the attachment to the cranial nerves. Now I will talk about the gross anatomy of the brainstem in concise and crisp way. As I have already told, brainstem is formed by medulla, pons and midbrain. Uppermost part which connects the hypothalamus and the cerebrum to the pons is midbrain. Small part, middle part, pons, acts as a bridge between right and left cerebellum and bridge between the midbrain and the medulla. The lowermost part and longest part of the brainstem is medulla, which is more than 3 cm in length. The total length of the brainstem is about 3 inches or 8 centimeters. Here are the cerebral peduncles of the midbrain. Here we can see the optic tract and optic chiasma. This is crossing of the, this is anterior view of the brainstem. This is crossing of the optic nerve fiber in optic chiasma and now optic tract, and these are the cerebral peduncles. In anterior part, here we can see the mammillary bodies, the tuber cinereum here and the infundibulum, from which the pituitary gland is hanged in the sella turcica, and the bridge-like part between the two cerebellum halves is pons. These are the connection of the pons to the cerebellum, that is middle cerebellar peduncles, and here is medulla, here is anterior median fissure, which is continuing with the anterior median fissure of the spinal cord, and here is a foramen like structure at the junction of the medulla and pons, that is pontomedullary junction. This is known as foramen cecum. Below here it is the spinal cord. Here is anterior median sulcus, continue with the anterior median fissure of the brainstem, and posterior median sulcus here. Here is the gray matter of the spinal cord. So here are two lateral swellings formed by the descending corticospinal fibers and corticobulbar fibers, and known as pyramids of the medulla. In lateral part of the pyramid, there are two big prominences of the inferior olivary or inferior olivary complex, and here are the inferior cerebral peduncles of the medulla, which connect the medulla to the cerebellum. As I have already told, hypoglossal nerve emerges from the junction of the pyramid and olive, and 9, 10, 11, that is glossopharyngeal, vagus, and spinal accessory. Only cranial part of spinal accessory nerve emerges from the junction of the olive and the inferior cerebellar peduncle. So, optic chiasma, optic tract, this is interpeduncular fossa having posterior perforating substance, and the mammary bodies, the tubercinarium and the pituitary stop, infundibulum, and now then stalk of pituitary. So this is anterior view of the spinal of the brainstem and upper part of the spinal cord. Now we will see the dorsum of the brainstem. The dorsum of the brain. The lowermost part of medulla is closed part having a central canal like the spinal cord, but upper part, which is open part and form the lower half of the rhomboid fossa or floor of the fourth ventricle. It is formed by medulla. The upper half or upper part of this rhomboid fossa or floor of fourth ventricle is formed by the posterior surface of the pons. So below it is formed by medulla and above it is formed by the pons. So the posterior view of the brainstem is like this. These are two cerebral peduncles. These are four colliculi, superior colliculi and inferior colliculi, and these colliculi collectively known as corpora quadrigemina. These are concerned with visual and auditory reflexes. These are connected to the superior brachium and inferior brachium. It is superior brachium. Brachium means arm. Superior brachium and inferior brachium. So there are arms in the visual and auditory pathway, and it is having these are two cerebral peduncles of the midbrain, which are seen from lateral side. This is lateral part. These form the anterior and lateral part of the midbrain, and now it is. These are corpora quadrigemina, and lower part is formed by the upper half of the floor of the fourth ventricle. This is the upper half of the rhomboid fossa or the floor of the fourth ventricle. And here are upper lateral part of the fourth ventricle formed by superior cerebellar peduncle, and here is frenulum valley The roof of the uppermost part of the fourth ventricle is covered by a delicate membrane known as superior medullary velum, and uppermost part of the superior medullary velum is having a frenulum-like structure, so known as frenulum valley. So this part is known as frenulum valley, and this part is roofed by the cerebellum, and it is formed by the posterior surface of the pons, that is tegmentum of the pons, and it is having a now I will draw the lower half of the fourth ventricle or rhomboid fossa. This is the lower half of the rhomboid fossa, and this is the lower part of the medulla, and it remains continue with the spinal cord here again, and lower closed part of the medulla and upper open part of the medulla, forming the lower half of the floor of the fourth ventricle. And here is area postrema. These are inferior fovea, and these are area postrema. The meeting point of this central canal and lowermost part of the floor of the fourth ventricle is known as obex. This point is known as obex. This is posterior median sulcus, and the lower part of the upper half of the floor of the fourth ventricle, that is the pontine part of the fourth ventricle, is having two eminences, median eminences. These eminences are formed by the facial nerve. When facial nerve winds round the nuclei of the abducent nerve, it forms two prominences, one in right and other is in left. These are known as facial colliculi. Lateral to facial colliculi, there are two other prominences which are formed by the vestibular nuclear complex. The vestibular, this is related to 7th nerve and this is related to 8th nerve. The vestibular nuclear complex is having 4 nuclei: upper, that is superior, inferior, medial and lateral. The lateral is having the largest cells, and the medial and the lower and lateral are in the medulla, and the superior and medial are in the pons. Lateral vestibular nuclei is having the largest cells. So this vestibular nucleus form the vestibular prominences. In the upper part of the medulla and in the lower part of floor of fourth ventricle, there are the hypoglossal triangle or hypoglossal trigon here. It is having the nuclei of hypoglossal nerve, that is general somatic efferent column. This is known as trigon of the hypoglossal nerve or hypoglossal triangle. Lateral to this hypoglossal triangle,